I have seen a distinct decrease and fall off in attention and support on Kick. What do I mean by that? Once again, I think they've done it. And what do I mean by that? This will very much become a game that's going to be a lengthy playthrough for me. And what do I mean by that? In Soros, literally every single run matters. What do I mean by that? What the truth is, I think they understand the game. Okay? And what do I mean by that? This is an important one, and this is one that I really wish I had time to do myself, and I just don't. Highlight clips. Okay? What do I mean by that? However, my playthrough would have been rushed. What do I mean by that? The P.O. box was useful about 20% of the time. What do I mean by that? Support for my regular streams has skyrocketed. What do I mean by that? The truth is, on Kick, it actually has helped me a lot. What do I mean by that? I don't want this to be South of Midnight Part 2. What do I mean by that? So basically, it's sauce. What do I mean by that? I made a gross miscalculation. What do I mean by that? This now has realigned our marathons. What do I mean by that? They actually hide the lag. What do I mean by that? Then, it was make or break time for Death Stranding. What do I mean by that? Only eat during the day when you have stuff ahead of you to do. What do I mean by that? Sushi isn't very impressive to watch. And what do I mean by that? Restaurants that are more sit-down style have been trying to compete directly with fast food. What do I mean by that? They have literally, again, redone the same exact collection. What do I mean by that? Yesterday just started off on the wrong foot right from the get-go. And what do I mean by that? That's the opposite of who I am as a creator, quite frankly. All right? Now, what do I mean by that? Kick completely changed the way that their partner program works. What do I mean by that? A lot of cologne marketing is a scam. What do I mean by that? It looked like no drama contributions. What do I mean by that? It gets a weird idea in its head and it won't unprogram itself. What do I mean by that? The thing is, they're a certain style of game. What do I mean by that? There is no real way to get this camera consistently in a spot where I don't have to keep moving it. What do I mean by that? It seems like whenever I'm not around, people on the internet get stir crazy. What do I mean by that? It really is going to be dependent on what happens with this Night Rain beta. And what do I mean by that? Street Fighter 6 should admit it and not lie. What do I mean by that? One of its biggest strengths is also one of its biggest weaknesses. What do I mean by that? They didn't put enough effort into the game to make it so that it would have longevity. What do I mean by that? Trying out Dark Souls 1 with these mods that we're going to be messing with, I think is going to make it a defining experience. What do I mean by that? The issue with videos being uploaded to YouTube. What do I mean by that? You ready for this? This Friday, we start Call of Duty wagers on Kick. You know, the site that's supposed to be for, like, wagering. So what do I mean by that? But then I started to play opponents that literally have learned new pattern play. And what do I mean by that? What if that applies to everyone? What do I mean by that? If the king streak ends today, I honestly wouldn't be surprised. What do I mean by that? The entire case is magnetic. What do I mean by that? So here's a really cool feature with this camera. I can adjust it completely by sitting here. I don't have to get up. What do I mean by that? And I think the reason I'm having a problem with casual matches is because Capcom fucked it up. What do I mean by that? We're now actually getting into the best parts. What do I mean by that? The Nintendo Switch has now been out for the longest period of time that any Nintendo console has ever been out and released without being replaced. What do I mean by that? Today was both my best and worst Street Fighter 6 day. What do I mean by that? When I played this back in the day, okay, it was a different time for YouTube. What do I mean by that? There's just not a lot going on right now in regards to big deal stuff. And what do I mean by that? But it's almost like the name of the DLC is literal. Okay? What do I mean by that? So, the other improvement, and this is one that actually has been a pet peeve of certain people. You may have noticed something, okay? My webcam. And what do I mean by that? But then the pain began. And what do I mean by that? When you have this much in the game, right? Are they putting too much into it? Now, what do I mean by that? But it's funny because I'm looking and basically it all happened at once. What do I mean by that? The one thing that does disappoint me, all right? I'm going to be honest, this disappoints me. It doesn't seem like the viewership is along for the ride. What do I mean by that? This game's formula has been exposed. What do I mean by that? Last night, the late stream was Modern Warfare 3. Now, here's the thing. Modern Warfare 3 is kind of become my guilty pleasure. What do I mean by that? It does have clear shortcomings. Okay? What do I mean by that? Well, all right, plus, here's the thing. I would almost bet that they're going to try to pull a GTA 5 again. What do I mean by that? So tonight, I'll watch some Dalsim stuff from Top Dalsims, try to absorb that tech, and I will try to level up tomorrow on the late stream, okay? Now, what do you mean? What do I mean by that? And then I saw literally the Xbox Hate Brigade. What do I mean by that? The only way to win the fights here at the end of the game without great difficulty and ridiculous amounts of grinding is to grind. Now, you might be saying, what? What do I mean by that? And today's one of those days. What do I mean by that? Today is the calm before the storm. What do I mean by that? And sadly, the way that they've designed it, it's RNG. Now, what do I mean by that? Tuesday night will be more Chrono Trigger. Wednesday's up in the air. And what do I mean by that? Sadly, YouTube's ecosystem has definitely changed. So, what do I mean by that? And I'm going to do my best, okay, to make sure that the nonsense doesn't permeate my streams and my content. And what do I mean by that? This game, sadly, is not equal for everyone. And what do I mean by that? How can I even say? Luke is... He basically is really easy to play. What do I mean by that? Also, coming up in July, special React event. I'm going to start planning it soon. It's going to be a day of machinima. What do I mean by that? It's basically doing charge moves in a different way. What do I mean by that? Happy Saturday, or I guess what I should say is, Happy Catterday. What do I mean by that? However, in the last 2 years, I started to have problems now with my capture device. And what do I mean by that? I'm going to urge you to change your vote. What do I mean by that? That this game has been mastered for the Series S and X. Now, what do I mean by that? This content ID claim actually did things in a reasonable and legal manner. What do I mean by that? I actually called it a proof of concept for the business as I attempt to diversify. What do I mean by that? However, two ginormous detriments on YouTube. The first is there is zero discoverability on YouTube. What do I mean by that? By the way, it's funny. Exactly what I thought would happen happened yesterday. So, what do I mean by that? I would say that X-Men on the Fox side and Batman/Superman on the WB side were the two cartoons that were comic book cartoon shows that took the audience seriously. Now, what do I mean by that? By the way, when it went visible, I'm not even sure if it published. And what do I mean by that? All of the games that I will be playing in the month of November have licensed soundtracks. What do I mean by that? The voting has been very contentious, to say the least. What do I mean by that? I'm actually excited today is because we changed everything up at the end of yesterday's stream. Now, what do I mean by that? We got that item that's going to allow us to unlock the top level challenge for a weapon without actually doing the challenge. So, what do I mean by that? I'll show you. Now, in addition to that, I have my own set of rules to maintain a chill vibe on my streams. What do I mean by that? And so, please understand that and know that there's certain rules we have in effect that I feel help to maintain that chill vibe. All right? What do I mean by that? If you're considering contributing to any streamer in any significant way, I would strongly recommend you do as much as you can to hide your identity, okay? What do I mean by that? The perfect version of Super Turbo has never been created. The first, I think, quite frankly, is because the game is so old. What do I mean by that? I mean, Extinction has randomly generated stages in the campaign. What do I mean by that? Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen, is the day that things are going to be drastically different from what I originally thought they were going to be. What do I mean by that? This week in particular is the week when basically everything has boiled over this coming week of November, all right? What do I mean by that? I think what I'm going to do is do a second run through the game, but it's going to be an edited run. Now, what do I mean by that? If you're following this on YouTube, you may be saying, what do I mean by that? Well, the bottom line is that I have not played this game in a week. I've been busy with other stuff, new releases. It's a combination of so many different kinds of gameplay, okay? You got a little bit of Borderlands in there, you've got a little bit of the Fallout, and then you've also got the hardcore FPS. Now, what do I mean by that?